To the surprise of no one, Blue Beetle is already being considered a box office flop with a $25.4 million opening weekend. To be fair, it did earn an additional $18 million internationally. But it's pretty clear that it's going to take a miracle for this movie to even break even in the end. But now the big question is, who or what is to blame this time? Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
What's funny about Blue Beetle is that it already seems to be one of those protected movies in the media, with the benefit of built-in excuses, as well as headlines that are flat out trying to spin this into a positive. If you Google Blue Beetle box office, most of the headlines you will read will talk about how it barely beat the very financially successful Barbie this weekend. One article even suggests that Blue Beetle Mania is pushing this movie to the #1 spot.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
That's right, Blue Beetle Mania pushed this movie to a $25.4 million opening weekend. Let that sink in. Online and on social media, we see a different level of cope happening, with fanboys desperately blaming anything they can for this financial disaster. Everything from a California hurricane to some schools starting early, and of course to blaming Zack Snyder for doing too much damage to the DC brand in the public eye. I feel like that excuse is going to be used forever, or at least until it's not convenient for their argument anymore.
You're pathetically predictable.
In reality, the only people who are damaging the DC brand and who deserve the bulk of the blame for this situation is WB. Let's analyze this for a second, because for those keeping count, Blue Beetle is the 7th flop in a row for the DCEU at the box office. And this more than anything should signify that there is a much larger problem happening here. This is a creative problem. Quite simply, WB is making decisions on what projects to make based on what a small minority of people want. That minority being social media users.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
You see, there was a time when the goal was to make movies that appeal to the masses, because that's going to maximize your profits, naturally. The goal should always be to attract general audiences, because you know the fanboys are going to show up no matter what. Unless, of course, you manage to piss a large portion of them off in the process. WB has simply forgotten who they are making movies for in their desperate attempts to catch up with Marvel. They think that online chatter and social media buzz is enough to push these movies to success. But it's been proven time and time again that these people either don't support these movies in the way that they say they do, or simply that there's just not enough of them to generate significant box office numbers. For those that don't know, there was an online campaign and hashtag called the Blue Beetle Battalion that was supposed to inspire a movement to support this film financially. And it actually had some people convinced that the online support for this movie would lead to Blue Beetle becoming a sleeper hit.
You serious?
But you see, they forgot one very important detail, that being social media hype is not real hype. In the real world, nobody, and I mean nobody amongst general audiences, gives a about Blue Beetle. So in a lot of ways, this movie was set up to fail from the beginning because nobody asked for it.
Nobody cares.
It's the same reason that Shazam, James Gunn's Suicide Squad, Black Adam, and The Flash all flopped prior to Blue Beetle. It doesn't matter how many people on social media say that they are interested in these movies and that they're going to support these movies. If you don't have the support of general audiences, then it will all be for nothing. Do you know how many social media users were confused by Avatar 2's success at the box office because they quote-unquote don't see anybody talking about it? No, you just don't see anybody talking about it in your small social media circles. In the real world, real people were going out and supporting that movie with their wallets and not just with words and hashtags. But yet these are the people that WB is trying to appeal to now. And they wonder why they are now failing in the process.
That is why you fail.
The other aspect to this, and this is something that I've talked about a lot on this channel, is the very obviously disingenuous reactions that movies like Blue Beetle get from critics. How many times have we heard critics say that these recent DC movies are the best DC movie since The Dark Knight? They use that line so often that it's actually lost all meaning at this point. And it's all because The Dark Knight is the gold standard, and they are constantly trying to push mediocre movies to meet that standard. It happened recently with The Flash as well, with James Gunn himself proclaiming prior to its release that it was one of the greatest comic book movies ever made.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber.
A comment that has aged like a glass of milk in the sun in the middle of the summer. Now I know what some of you are thinking, well, these are just people's opinions, and who am I to decide what is genuine or not? Here's the problem. Critics already have a bad reputation for being untrustworthy. And I have to believe that audiences are smartening up and seeing through these desperate attempts to praise mediocre films. Perhaps critics are just afraid to be honest, or maybe they're getting benefits for talking about a film positively. Show me the money. But it is clear that there is a severe disconnect between critics and audiences right now. So even if their praise is genuine, their word doesn't hold the same weight that it used to. When it comes right down to it, Blue Beetle is an average to below average movie, and most people could see that from the trailer alone. And if you couple that with a severe lack of interest in the character to begin with, all of that adds up to yet another DC flop.
That makes sense.
If WB would like to avoid this type of thing in the future, a drastic course correct is necessary. And no, I'm not talking about a James Gunn reboot. I'm talking about reigniting fans' interest in the brand by focusing on projects that are writer and director driven and not studio driven. The only way to succeed is to start making movies that appeal to everyone rather than making movies that appeal to a vocal minority that is all talk and no action.
Y'all be cool. Right on.